Canada just announced a sovereign wealth fund, and depending on who you ask, it's either a brilliant long-term strategy or a massive financial gamble. So instead of noise, spin, and talking points, let's actually break it down. I'm Bo Kaufman, and this is the Sanity Project. Now, this is one of those topics that sounds complex, but really shouldn't be. So instead of a debate or a panel, we put together a clear, straight-through whiteboard explainer, something that walks through step by step what a sovereign wealth fund actually is, how it works, and why Canada is moving in this direction right now. No jargon, no politics, just the mechanics and what it means. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Explainer. So if you've been tracking the financial news at all lately, you have definitely seen the headlines. The government is proposing a massive new financial vehicle called the Canada Strong Fund, seeded with $25 billion. Today, we're going to completely unpack the architectural blueprint of this announcement. We're going to stress test the structural integrity of the plan, look at some real-world historical precedents, and figure out what exactly happens when huge political ambition collides with economic reality.
Right out of the gate, the pitch for this new national wealth vehicle is undeniably ambitious. Prime Minister Mark Carney recently announced the creation of what they're calling Canada's first ever sovereign wealth fund. The stated goal here is to catalyze major nation-building projects. We're talking energy, critical minerals, infrastructure, and tech. It's a really bold vision for domestic investment, designed to make the economy more resilient and, crucially, allow everyday citizens to get in on the wealth creation.
But this brings us to the core conflict we really need to resolve in today's explainer. On one side, you've got this incredibly optimistic political vision of a self-sufficient powerhouse economy. But on the other side, you have the stark, cold reality of how large-scale, state-backed financial engineering actually operates in the real world. So, we have to ask, is this a stroke of nation-building genius, or is it basically just a massive, incredibly risky bet put right on the national credit card?
To figure that out, we first need to understand the baseline mechanics. Let's get into Section 1, the $25 billion blueprint.
Before we evaluate the specific Canadian proposal, let's just make sure we're on the same page about what a sovereign wealth fund actually is. Think of it kind of like a giant state-owned savings account, but one that acts like a highly aggressive investment bank. So instead of just letting public money sit idle in a vault, the state uses this vehicle to buy up assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, physical infrastructure, you name it. The goal is to earn a solid return, exponentially grow the size of the fund, and ultimately bulletproof public finances for future generations.
Okay, so how does the Canada Strong Fund fit into that definition? Well, here are the core specs, pulled directly from the government's announcement. The fund is going to be seeded with an initial $25 billion over 3 years. The focus is strictly domestic, targeting strategic Canadian projects like energy and advanced manufacturing. They've designed it to be an arm's-length crown corporation, meaning it's supposed to operate independently from whatever political party happens to be in power. And perhaps most uniquely, there's an option for direct retail investors, meaning you and me, to actually buy in.
Ever since this was announced, pretty much everyone has pointed to one famous global example to justify it. But we really need to clear the air here. Section 2, debunking the Norway myth. Politicians absolutely love to reference Norway's famous $2 trillion sovereign wealth fund. But look really closely at the contrast here, because the economic physics of these two funds are completely different. Norway's fund was built on massive budget surpluses from North Sea oil. Canada's fund, it's being seeded by issuing government debt. Norway invests entirely outside of its borders. Canada's fund is strictly domestic. And Norway's fund is protected by ironclad constitutional rules, while Canada's currently has absolutely zero underlying legislative protection. Let me be super clear about this. This is not a minor difference. This is the whole ballgame.
An economist, Professor Joseph Steinberg, brilliantly illustrates why that difference is so absolutely crucial. He points out that literally 100% of Norway's fund is invested outside the country. Why? Specifically to avoid overheating and distorting their own domestic economy. If a government just dumps billions of dollars into domestic projects, you run the very real risk of crowding out private investment and artificially jacking up costs. Canada is choosing the exact opposite path. So if Norway isn't the right comparison, what is?
Let's move on to Section 3, identifying the real analogs. We need to find the architectural models that actually resemble what Canada is building.
Forget Norway. We really should be looking at Canada's own CPP Investments and Singapore's Temasek Holdings. These are the accurate analogs. Both act as highly proven blueprints for independent, state-linked wealth management. They operate at arm's length from their governments, just like the Canada Strong Fund is proposing. But pay attention to the difference in focus. CPP has a very strict fiduciary duty to maximize returns for pensioners. Temasek focuses on generational growth. The Canada Strong Fund, however, is explicitly blending financial returns with domestic economic development.
And look, we know for a fact that the arm's length model can work spectacularly well in Canada. Just look at this number. Over $780 billion. That is the massive amount of assets under management by CPP Investments at the end of 2023. It is the ultimate domestic proof of concept. It proves that an independent, professionally managed Canadian Crown Corporation can successfully invest and grow capital on a massive global scale. But remember, the Canada Strong Fund is a slightly different beast. Jordan Eisinga over at Deloitte makes a great point about this. He notes that this new fund is blending the desire for financial returns with a mandate for national capacity building. It wants to make money, for sure, but it also wants to guarantee that key domestic industries get built out. And honestly, that dual mandate makes the underlying math incredibly tricky.
Which brings us to arguably the most globally unprecedented element of this entire blueprint. Section 4, stress testing retail investors.
So the government has heavily pitched this idea that direct citizen participation is a key feature, that you'll be able to buy into this fund with your own savings, and that your initial capital will be protected. But we have to probe that. Is capital protection a real functional mechanism here, or is it just political marketing language? If the core $25 billion fund is being financed by government debt, and it's throwing money at high-risk domestic infrastructure, how exactly is your downside magically protected? Now, to be fair, the government is being honest that the actual product design is still in consultation, but it's a massive question mark.
Financial expert David Lester hits the nail on the head regarding the mechanics of debt-financed funds. He uses a great analogy. He says, you can't really use your credit card to go buy an investment. Why? Because the interest you owe on the credit card is totally fixed, but the return you get from the investment is not. When a government borrows money to seed a fund, they owe a fixed interest rate, but the returns from these infrastructure projects, not guaranteed at all. If the investments fail or even just yield less than the cost of borrowing the money, the math simply breaks down.
And this ladders up into a much broader economic concern. A lot of experts are worried that creating this massive new fund is really just an overly complicated way to issue government debt. They worry it's designed to bridge what the tech world calls the valley of death, that incredibly perilous phase where a startup has burned through its initial cash but isn't ready for traditional commercial debt. We have to ask, are we actually creating a sophisticated investment vehicle here, or are we simply asking taxpayers to step in and absorb the risk on projects that professional angel investors already walked away from?
To really answer that, we have to look at what's conspicuously absent from the plan. Section 5, naming the missing pieces.
We need to be clear-eyed here and just name these gaps plainly without any partisan spin. Right now, this blueprint is completely uncompleted. These are confirmed gaps. Fact, there are absolutely no confirmed project designations yet, meaning we don't know what specific things this fund is actually going to buy. Fact, there is no finalized governance framework detailing how the board will be chosen to avoid political interference. And fact, there is zero legislative protection drafted to ensure this fund survives the next election. Which leads us right back to Professor Steinberg's cynical but totally realistic question. Without those strict guardrails in place, how do we really know the fund's true intent? Will it actually anchor vital projects of national interest and successfully attract private capital? Or will it just become a convenient vehicle for the private sector to offload their unappealing, high-risk, low-return projects onto Canadian taxpayers? Until the actual legislation is written, both of those outcomes are entirely possible.
All right, let's synthesize all this evidence. Section 6, the final verdict.
Based on all the data, our verdict is one of cautious optimism grounded strictly in the evidence. The architecture itself is sound. We know from the incredible track record of CPP Investments and Temasek that the arm's-length, independent Crown Corporation model is a highly effective way to manage wealth. That foundation works. However, the blueprint is incomplete. The vital details, how projects are actually selected, how your retail capital is shielded, and how they prevent political meddling, all of that remains totally unconfirmed.
And that leaves us with one final thought to ponder. As the government goes through its consultations, this product design is going to evolve. When the actual project designations and the governing legislation are finally published, which we will absolutely cover in part 2 of this explainer, we'll finally be able to check the math. But until then, the ultimate question remains, if these domestic investments fall short, who is actually going to be holding the receipt? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and stay focused.
And that's the core of it. A sovereign wealth fund isn't complicated once you strip it down, but the implications, those are big. Because this isn't just about investing money. It's about how Canada chooses to shape its future, how much risk we're willing to take, and who we trust to manage it. Now I want to hear from you. Do you see this as a smart long-term move, or something that could go sideways? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more clear, no-nonsense breakdowns like this, make sure you're subscribed. I'm Bo Kaufman, and this is the Sanity Project.
If you want more facts and less fear, hit subscribe. Check out the next breakdown wherever you're listening or watching. Stay sane, Canada.